When fighting a war, there are many clever and sinister ways of disrupting the enemy, sabotage or espionage to name a few, but there are also some ingenious ways your everyday soldier can have a similar effect. Today we will be looking at some of the booby traps used by the soldiers fighting these wars, and how they would do anything to gain the upper hand over their enemies. This is 5 most infamous booby traps of the 20th century. Number 5. The picture frame bomb. During World War II, the German army would be pushed back and find itself attacked from all sides, leading to desperate tactics being adopted in order to slow the advance of the Allies. During the steady retreat back to Berlin, the German army would start to lay booby traps with a very specific target in mind. With the Allies often needing to set up temporary forward headquarters because of the regularly changing front lines, the German troops devised an ingenious way of targeting the command staff and high-ranking officers. They would booby trap potential HQ locations with wall-mounted explosives triggered by a crooked picture frame. The idea behind the trap was that the civilized officers that occupied these headquarters would be the only ones bothered enough to adjust the crooked picture, thereby setting off the explosive, killing themselves and their command staff, while slowing the advance of troops in that region for a short period of time. Though successful and deadly, the tactic only managed to do just that, slow the advance, but without the means to adequately counter-attack by that time in the war, the trap would have no real effect on the outcome of the conflict. Number 4. Project Eldest Son. During the Vietnam War, American special forces were tasked with damaging the morale of their communist enemies by means of sabotage, making them question the safety of their munitions supplied to them from their Chinese and Russian arms dealers. The project focused on placement of exploding bullet cartridges into the supplies of the Viet Cong, as well as tampered mortar rounds that would explode while still in the tube, and documents citing fake incident reports of faulty Chinese munitions killing their own soldiers. The special forces would have to travel secretly by night through dense jungle in order to place these sabotaged munitions. Then with great skill and sleight of hand they would infiltrate the enemy camp placing the packages, then they would leave without a trace. Unfortunately for the American army, somehow the media caught wind of the operation, and news leaks allowed communist forces to determine the true cause of their weapon failures. It led to tighter defenses of the enemy supply dumps and ruined any damage to morale the operation might have had. Number 3. Carcass explosives. With insurgent groups in the Middle East having a clear technological disadvantage when engaging US and other anti-terrorist forces, they would have to employ other tactics in an attempt to even out the playing field. One of these ingenious tactics was to hide explosives in the remains of animal carcasses along roadsides and other areas. The decomposing corpse would often be left alone by unintended civilian targets, causing them to be rarely tampered with, and hidden in one of the most unlikely of places. The dead animal's body normally wasn't large enough to hide very large explosives to take out a large armored vehicle, but was perhaps the perfect size to store an anti-personnel device, making the booby trap most effective against patrolling troop formations and very light vehicles. It would be just one more thing, adding to the long list of potential dangers anti-insurgency forces had to deal with in these hostile provinces of the Middle East. Number 2. Punji pits. Punji traps were made by Viet Cong guerrilla soldiers with limited resources in the jungles of South Vietnam. They were particularly infamous for their simplicity and effectiveness on both morale and the enemy platoon as a whole. The pit is a dug hole both small and large, with sharpened bamboo pikes riddling the bottom and sides. Surprisingly, although less lethal, the smaller pits were more effective in disrupting the enemy. The soldiers would fall victim to the pit while on patrol deep in the jungle and far from any extraction points. The spikes that were often coated in human feces and snake venom would stab through the person's feet in multiple stab wounds, leaving the soldier as a hindrance on the squad as a whole, and the toxic coatings on the spikes causing terrible infections in the wound. Many squads would go into battle with less than full strength, having to leave some members to either guard or extract the impaled person, making the trap more effective than if it was to just simply kill the soldier. Number 1. The bamboo whip. With bamboo being so plentiful in the jungles of Vietnam, it was only natural for it to be used in many traps of the Viet Cong. The whip consisted of spikes tied to a frame on the end of a stick of bamboo. The stick was pulled back around a tree or a rock, creating a large amount of tension on the very tough plant. Using a catch attached to a tripwire, the bamboo would release and strike with tremendous force, plunging the spikes into the body of the patrolling GI. The trap was so common that it became well known by the soldiers facing it, and patrols would become hyper-specialized at detecting these deadly yet primitive devices. These, just like the Punji pit spikes, were also often dipped in a deadly venom or rancid excrement. Easily being one of the most iconic booby traps, it's still only one of the ingenious traps that was used by the Viet Cong, and many were riddled throughout the jungles ready to maim their unsuspecting victims. That was 5 most infamous booby traps of the 20th century. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.